Hello, everyone. This is the last recording for our second unit of biology. We're wrapping up our study on cells by looking at what cells are actually made of. So we talked about all the organelles that are present in the cell and what they do when we talked about cellular respiration and photosynthesis to make energy for the cell. The macromolecules that we're going to talk about today are what make up all those organelles. And we've kind of touched on them as we went. We've mentioned proteins, we've mentioned carbohydrates, we even mentioned lipids and nucleic acids just a little bit. Today we're going to dive a little bit deeper than that. This is also kind of a reprieve, a breather from how heavy our material has been, so this should be a little bit lighter. I know that there were 4 pages that you had to read before now, and we've been doing some work in class, but hopefully this is a little easier than the photosynthesis and the cellular respiration that we just wrapped up. So our first macromolecule is a carbohydrate. You've probably heard of these with your food. Sugars are carbohydrates, so they're in a lot of our foods. They're made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms, and this notation here, the CH subscript 2, an O, and then a subscript N on the outside of it, is how we talk about these molecules. This is a model of a carbohydrate, and the little N just says how many repeating units there are. You guys saw this in the model on the CK12 that kind of zoomed in and out from monosaccharides to disaccharides to polysaccharides if you dragged that little blue dot around like you should have. So a monosaccharide just has only a few of the subunits, and it's going to have usually just anywhere from 3 to 7 of these. It's going to make one monosaccharide, though. They're not always going to look like this model. A lot of times they'll look like hexagonal structures. And these make up our simple sugars, including glucose, the one that we spent a lot of time with the past 2 weeks. If you put 2 monosaccharides together, you get a disaccharide. And if you keep adding to that chain, you get polysaccharides. Remember, mono means 1, di means 2, and poly means many. Carbohydrates are a great source of energy for fast energy. They also are structural. So we could see them in glucose, but we also might see them as cellulose or starch in plant cell walls, or chitin in like exoskeletons of bugs, or in mushrooms. So the chitin is going to include nitrogen in the mix of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but it's very, very similar. So carbohydrates are simple or complex. Simple is straight line monosaccharides like this. Complex have more functions than just storing energies and forming structures. They have a few more of these units as well. So the monomer is a monosaccharide. The next one we're going to talk about are lipids. So if we think about carbohydrates as sugars, lipids are fats. And that's how we're going to find them in most of our everyday life when we really experience them. But they're also in things like oil and wax. So if your skin gets oily, say after a game, like playing soccer or football right now in the fall, or volleyball, then you might have some oil on your skin. If you have wax, any kind of wax, not just the type of candle, but these are going to be lipids. Their monomers are glycerin and fatty acids. Right? Fatty acids, much like the carbohydrates, are going to be these chains of molecules. You can see the 2 kinds of chains here on the right side. Saturated fatty acids are straight line, and they have a bunch of single bonds between the carbon and the hydrogen. A unsaturated fatty acid is going to have at least one set of carbons that are double bonded. You might remember from physical science that double bonds are a little shorter. And because those carbons don't have a balanced amount of hydrogens on both sides of them, it bends the molecule. So we get this bend. Right? That's an unsaturated fatty acid. It doesn't have as many hydrogens as it can hold, so we call it unsaturated. Lipids are fats, and just like fats in our bodies, they are for long-term energy storage. They are great at storing a lot of chemical energy. So, like if you think about burning oil or wax, that might last a long time, like a candle. These are also in our cell membranes, our plasma membranes. So remember, those were two of the same thing, just different words. In our phospholipids, and you should remember me talking about phospholipids as the two halves of the plasma membrane. So the phospholipids have a saturated fatty acid and an unsaturated fatty acid in their tail, which is hydrophobic. Right? We'll also run into these in steroids, like medicines, chemical messengers as well. We will also encounter them in our plants. They'll also store these as energy, but they're not going to store them the same way. And having too many fats in any dietary type of situation is going to be harmful. Nucleic acids are kind of what we're going to jump into a little bit later in the year, not next unit, but the unit after, when we talk about DNA, and we really dive deeper into DNA. So nucleic acids are a macromolecule that has a bunch of repeating nucleotides. So in this case, our monomer is a nucleotide. This one on screen is DNA. We've got a nitrogenous base, a sugar, and a phosphate together. We may also see it like this. We'll revisit this later when we dive deeper into DNA. We also will run into nucleic acids when we talk about RNA later this year. And ATP, the adenosine triphosphate that we've been talking about, that is a nucleic acid as well. Because there are so many different combinations, a lot of information can be stored inside a nucleic acid through these repeating nucleotides. We will talk about how those interact and work later. For now, I just want you to know that nucleic acids are, again, a way to store information. You'll see this repeating pattern here with C's, G's, A's, and T's always binding together. This pattern of cytosine bonding to guanine, adenine bonding to thymine. You should remember that DNA is the genetic material from when we were talking about organelles, so keep that in mind as well. And here's just one more model to show you the repeating pattern. Again, the C, the G, the A, those are cytosine, guanine, adenine, but now this is U in uracil, and this is RNA, right? But again, it's similar, just a little different. So proteins, the last macromolecule that we're going to talk about, are organic compounds made of amino acids and are the monomers of proteins. So our monomer is amino acids. A protein can have up to 4 levels of structure. I've got a model of each of those here. We have a primary structure, a secondary, a tertiary, that means third, and quaternary, which is fourth. Right? So each of these is kind of like how it would coil up or bend. I like to think about if you take a shoelace and you start twisting it, it coils a certain way, and then if you keep twisting it, it'll kind of coil a slightly different way. And if you take that and you fold it up, or if you took 2 shoelaces and did that and then folded both of those together. So proteins can do a lot of different things because they are very, very complex. But they all have specific jobs. So the shape and what they're made of describe what they do, right? Many of them will speed up or slow down chemical reactions within the body. This is an enzymatic process. You might remember the word enzyme from physical science. I hope you do. But these enzymes work to catalyze, to allow reactions to happen. If we want to control enzymes or proteins, we can change the pH of the system that they're in. The temperature, like say if you have a fever, that's your body trying to kill off something, and by changing the temperature, that proteins in whatever bacteria is affecting you might not work and it will die, but your body can take it. We'll also find them in soaps and detergents and heavy metals. I put these in parentheses because these are usually bad ways to do it. Right? Soaps and detergents definitely kill whatever they're doing, and heavy metals, especially if you consume them as a person, is not good for you. And the reason it's not good for you is because it can affect the proteins in your body and how they can work. So we've got 4 different macromolecules. This is kind of, again, the zooming in more on those organelles, but we're also taking a step back and seeing where they're going to be at. We'll look more at these in the coming days. Remember to ask 2 questions and write those in your notes so that when I go around and check your notes, we can talk about them. And I will see you soon.